Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
But I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you at least explained that in a much better way, because that's the other challenge. There are people who are explaining it, but they are technocrats, and CPAs may not necessarily be technocrats. So to break it down in that layman's term, but they understand it in their language, like you said, an account of where those transactions happen. That's where the subledger is. That makes sense.
Well, and the reason I can give a very specific and relevant reason why having something like that in place and then having professionals like us involved is incredibly important. And again, we'll obviously leave names and places out of it, but had a very large and well-known group, let's say, and as a client was going through their transactions in their subledger, and they had thousands of transactions that were marked as taxable that should not have been. And it led to an overstatement of their tax liability by about $1.2 million. So we went in there, cleaned that up, and boom, the tax bill came down because, if you're getting into the crypto side, and I know we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but, there are internal transfers, from wallets that you own, internally, those should not be marked as taxable transactions. Now, if it was a sale, an exchange, or a purchase, that's a different story. You gotta calculate the tax hit on that and make sure that you're in the details there.
Welcome everyone to another episode of your favorite podcast we're trying to figure out. I'm your host Saul, and today we are diving into one of the most intriguing intersections of business and technology, cryptocurrency and the cannabis industry. We'll explore how digital currencies and blockchain are addressing some of the cannabis sector's biggest challenges, including banking restrictions, compliance, and operational inefficiencies. Joining me today is Zach Gordon, a CPA with over 15 years of experience across multiple industries and functions. He serves as a fractional CFO, strategic and tax advisor for a portfolio of crypto, cannabis, and tech companies. Today, we'll unpack how cryptocurrency is impacting the cannabis industry, share real-world examples, and discuss what the future might hold for these two rapidly evolving sectors. Welcome, Zach, to our podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And welcome to our viewers. If you have questions for Zach, please put those questions in the comments on LinkedIn or on YouTube. And if you're listening to this podcast version and you want to join us for future CPE approved podcasts at MyCPE, you can do that at mycpe.com/podcasts. Or you can also listen to the podcast on the go by downloading the MyCPE mobile app, which is available on the App Store for the iOS users and Play Store for the Android users. Now, let's start by setting the stage with the challenges that the cannabis businesses face, especially in banking and financial operations, right? The cannabis industry has always faced significant banking challenges due to the federal regulations in the United States. This has left many businesses relying heavily on cash transactions, which comes with security and efficiencies. So Zach, can you walk us through why banking remains such a persistent issue for cannabis businesses, even in states where it's legal?
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack. One, it's always fun to be at the intersection of podcasts and CPE. That's always a good time. It's the melding of two necessary worlds for us. So I always like to throw that out. But two, banking is such a big issue, and it has been, as you said, since in essence the inception of the legal industry. And legal is always a funny term. And the biggest issue that we still have is, as of this date and time, and it's always one of those big caveats we have to throw out there, but
Yep.
it's still federally illegal, cannabis. So regardless of the fact that individual state markets have established themselves as uh, legal states, they have programs for, there's any number of variables there, from medical, full adult use, and some derivatives thereof. So you do get banks that are small community-owned banks. You get some of the mid-tier banks that do actively participate, but the big banks, the large commercial banks, just have not made that jump yet. Now, it's a big misconception that it's illegal to bank in the industry. And again, that's another one of those fun technical things where technically it's not illegal to bank cannabis, assuming you pass diligence and your, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, et cetera, at the state level. But a lot of banks are hold your hats, risk averse, and will not make that jump until the various federal authorities say it is okay to begin. There's legislation that has been pushed through multiple times. The Safe Banking Act, there's been, 5 iterations of it now, something like that. And it's just a no-go so far.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk. I mean, it's a good thing you brought up the Safe Banking Act, because I was going to ask you that, because according to me, I think it's a game changer. But or do you think that crypto will remain a critical solution regardless of the regulatory changes? Do you think crypto would be overtaking the bank?
Oh, but that's a loaded question too. I think cryptocurrency, and as a bigger conversation, the blockchain have a big part to play in this, but it's going to be a delicate dance for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating, how cryptocurrency can step in where traditional financial institutions fail short. But with technology, there are hurdles, which brings us to the practical applications in the cannabis space, right? Because cryptocurrency is a complicated technological piece in itself.
Well, you talk about going from one weird, complicated tax situation to another one, and one weird regulatory environment to another one that's equally weird for different reasons. So you start getting, speaking of intersections, man, that's where it can really get sideways very quickly.
Yeah. No, I hear you. In fact, I mean, for everybody knows now what cryptocurrency is. They know that it is some form of payment. It's a form of it's a currency that you can use. But it's not just about enabling payments. It is today cryptocurrency is also used by these businesses for the payroll, for the vendor payments, even cross-border transactions, in fact. But I know that there's some. I have heard about some cannabis dispensaries in California and Colorado who have already adopted accepting Bitcoin payments, and I think there are also some platforms like BitPay that do that. But I've just heard, but then I would always love to hear it from you, because you've been dealing with these businesses. So how does cryptocurrency compare to other non-cash payment methods in terms of scalability and security in this industry?
Right. Well, one could argue that if you're running a compliant environment, it's more secure than traditional fiat, and that's where it gets very interesting. And that's where I think when you talk about not necessarily the practical application, just because the scale isn't there yet for specifically solving these types of issues, but if you're talking about conceptually, one could argue it's light years ahead from a security standpoint, from a transparency perspective. It's very interesting. And I know you mentioned a couple of the possibilities there as far as Bitcoin is concerned, where it becomes equally interesting and maybe a little bit more interesting with that forward-looking thought is stablecoins. So you have USDT, USDC, whatever it might be, pick your favorite stablecoin. That becomes very interesting very quick, because again, cross-border payments, a stablecoin can solve that particular issue. Though obviously not giving any advice to anybody, and this is just purely, for the sake of conversation here, we're not addressing some of the crossing state lines and some of the potential issues that can come with that. But just again, speaking conceptually, a stable coin can go a long way towards solving some of those issues. And we've seen platforms already solve that in other industries, from an accounts payable, accounts receivable, from just that pure transaction, whether B2B or B2C. That technology is beyond proven at this point. It's just making sure now that it's compliant in an industry with those hurdles.
Well, you mentioned stable coins, and I'm definitely going to be asking you more on it later on, because I remember, I think there was also a cryptocurrency, like, I think it was pot coin, or was it hemp coin or
Yep.
something like that, like specifically for the cannabis industry, but I'm
Right.
not quite sure where it is today. But I can.
It's not.
Okay. All right. It's not. Okay. That's good. That's good to know. Because otherwise I thought that, oh, well, this is I mean, it felt like it was a game turner, because I was like, well, as it is, the industry, cannabis industry is going through massive regulatory changes. The crypto industry is also going through massive regulatory changes. And then if at all there's somebody who is able to provide a solution which bridges both of them, great. But I don't really know what really went wrong there. But anyway.
Well, that's a loaded question in its own right, because man, there are so many different issues that can pop up. Again, you have two industries that are ripe with opportunity for things to go sideways, whether that's, again, regulatory, whether that's just bad players being involved. And I think this particular intersection does invite a lot of really bad players. So just balancing out all those things and going beyond just crossing T's, dotting I's, that sort of thing. It makes this even more essential, especially given the uncertainty from regulators on, again, both sides of this particular equation.
So if you're in the cannabis business, and we're seeing businesses already doing it, but if there was a cannabis business who was really trying to integrate crypto payments into the systems, just for argument's sake, what challenges do you foresee they would face when they try to do this into the system?
Oh man, we're gonna need another hour on top of this, but there issues that are relevant for us as CPAs, the tax. So making sure that you have a subledger in place from the crypto side to capture all of those potential transactions and the tax issues that come with that. Wallet hygiene, so making sure that you have the proper wallet set up, exactly what transactions are in there, what the purposes are, who has access. So internal controls are a big deal. Man, there's a lot of stuff there to break down.
You mentioned about wallet hygiene. Now, as far as I know, we got like this online wallets, like I think we got one for the Coinbase ones and everything. And then we also got the offline wallets.
Right.
So which one would be more appropriate for the business, for the cannabis business? Do you think we should go with the online ones? Because don't you think those records would then be somewhere else? You don't have control over the...
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So control is that big deal. So having... Yeah, of course, a digital wallet makes all the sense in the world. But even it's making sure that there's no commingled funds. And I can tell you that having, just speaking on the crypto side specifically, having worked with quite a few startups, protocols that were just getting getting their legs under them, that sort of thing. You've got personal digital assets in there. You've got business, you've got some things that might be staked. You might have a whole bunch of transactions that you don't really know what they are. It can get messy really fast. And if we're dealing with an industry that, on its best day is messy, you got to be careful.
Yeah, you got to be careful. And like you mentioned, CPAs need to know a lot of things. And I guess, that's the learning deficiency that remains. Because when we talk about cannabis, a lot of people refer to the 280E compliance that needs to be brought into. But then when we talk about crypto, it's a whole set of new terms in itself, like you mentioned, subledger, which is alien to a lot of people, right? A lot of people probably don't even know what a subledger is or how it works. Would you mind just enlightening a little bit on what that...
Of course. So a subledger is and there's a whole bunch of them right now, and there's plenty that are good. There's plenty that are okay. There's some that are not very good, but are cheap. And we'll leave names out of it, obviously, but you know who you are. Not kidding.
Yes. Yes.
But they're technology platforms that aggregate wallets and specifically
Uh-huh.
the transactions within those wallets. So the benefit of
Okay.
the blockchain is that every transaction is instantly identifiable based on the hash. So you know that based on the
Yes.
alphanumeric code, this is what the transaction is. These are the parties involved. This is how much of, ABC currency is moved from here to there.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's a platform that aggregates all that and has certain features that allow you to identify the parties at both ends of the transaction, and
Gotcha.
basically port those transactions into something that's usable to us as CPAs.
Yeah, you definitely
That's the
need that.
theory. The practice is never that clean, but that's the theory behind them.
Interesting. Interesting. I mean, like, and I do know of some platforms who are actually educating CPAs on this because we as professionals need to remain up to speed with the advancements in the industry. We need
Mhm.
to remain always ready with whatever changes are happening. So, but I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad you at least explained that in a much better way, because that's the other challenge. There are people who are explaining it, but they are technocrats, and CPAs may not necessarily be technocrats. So to break it down in that layman's term, but then they understand it in their line of their language. Like you said, an account of where those transactions happen. That's where the subledger is. Now. That makes sense.
Well, and the reason I can give a very specific and relevant reason why having something like that in place and then having professionals like us involved is incredibly important. And again, we'll obviously leave names and places out of it, but had a very large and well-known group, let's say, and as a client was going through their transactions in their subledger, and they
Mhm.
had thousands of transactions that were marked as taxable that should not have been. And
Mm.
it led to an overstatement of their tax liability by about $1.2 million. So we went
Wow.
in there, cleaned that up, and boom, the tax bill came down because, if you're getting into the crypto side, and I know we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but there are internal transfers, from wallets that you own, internally, those should not be marked as taxable transactions. Now,
That's
if it was a
right.
sale, an exchange, or a purchase, that's a different story. You gotta calculate the tax hit on that and make sure that you're, in the details there. But that
I
just speaks
guess
to one, the importance of us being on our game, and two, being educated and understanding the usefulness of having such a platform. And just that example there, it didn't take many more words to convince any of the clients where it's relevant to make sure they have this in place and that we're involved. I mean,
no, yeah, yeah.
you start having those sort of tax conversations, it wraps up real fast.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
No, it does. It does. No, it's absolutely true. And like, when you explain it, it makes sense. It's the categorization of the transactions that kind of creates that basis for the taxability of those transactions. But to understand and to be able to interpret those transactions in a subledger, that requires a different skill set, which is what we are required to develop and be able to do this in a fair way. But it's clear that cryptocurrency opens doors to more streamlined operations. You mentioned about how there's a full history of stuff and everything is stored on the blockchain. But I I do know for the fact that in fact I was talking to another gentleman a couple of days back, and he was telling me that the applicability of the blockchain is not it's beyond payments. It's not just a place where you record all the financial transactions,
Well,
beyond
one could argue
payments.
that currency is one of the
Yeah,
worst uses of the least efficient uses of blockchain technology around.
that's exactly what he said.
He
That's
sounds
exactly what
smart.
he said. Yeah, it's because he was the opinion is that the purpose of the technology was to make everyone aware of the secure way of getting things done,
Exactly.
but the acceptance was not coming in. That's why the concept of to put a financial aspect to it so that people start to accept that technology currencies were introduced. But he said the same thing, that currency is the worst form of using this technology, because it offers enormous, blockchain offers enormous potential. It ensures transparency and
Mm-hmm.
compliance in the entire cannabis supply chain, because in the cannabis supply
And
chain
you just hit on what should be the best use. If you're talking about compliance, inventory management, I mean,
correct,
that level of complete transparency from soup to nuts, from seed to sale,
seed to sale, exactly, exactly.
it's right there.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly, immutable records, ensuring there's quality, there's regulatory compliance. I mean, there's also, I mean, a line beyond that, because when you're able to see the transparency of the transaction, it also adds into the validity of the product when it finally reaches the customer's hand.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. And given that there have been recalls, there have been, some concerning cases out there, having that sort of, when I say assurance, I mean small a, not in the attest sense, but given audience and all that. But it gives you that sort of reasonable assurance that there are eyes on this thing, and that you can, whether you're a governmental authority, someone in the space, or just a consumer, you know what you're getting. And that's a really big deal.
I'm going to be asking you a question that I know the answer to, but I want because I'm pretty certain a lot of the listeners on this podcast would have this question, which is still not answered. And because you're really good at explaining everything in layman's terms. So the question that was asked to me by somebody else was, is a blockchain something that I have to install, or a piece of equipment that I need to have in my office, so that blockchain remains, or where is it? Like where or is it on?
That is one of my favorite questions. So no, you don't have to install it. The benefit of the blockchain is it's a network that's chopped up into a million different pieces and spread out over what are called nodes. So it's in essence a living, breathing network that is decentralized. So it's all it's amongst a large group, and that's why you see something like crypto mining is such a big industry, and why environmental concerns aside, it's because that's another deep conversation. That's why those are so heavily backed by investors, by the public markets, because there is that really important aspect of the blockchain itself, is how it's supported.
Well, I know we're not going to be, we did say that, we're not going to be naming anything, but I guess just for the sake of argument, if at all I were to ask you what blockchain tools or platforms are currently making waves in the cannabis industry, could you name some for our listeners?
The only reason I hesitate to do it is I don't want to necessarily give a stamp of approval or disapproval, because there's I'm trying to not give a non-answer, because I don't think they're there yet. I don't think that the standard has been set. There's a reason why it hasn't been picked up at scale. And that's because there's still a lot of work to be done, and it's still in its infancy. So I just hesitate to give too much light if it's not necessarily there yet. Do you know what I mean?
No, I completely agree to you, and I understand what you're trying to say. Why you mentioned that you believe that it's still not there. It's not perfected yet. It's not at this stage. It's not at that stage. So what are the drawbacks that you see in the existing setup? What is it that you see is still lacking? Could you tell about?
Well, there have been all right. So if we want to drop one at least, so there was Tokes, which sort of had its moment in time, and again, it's to try to solve the the transaction concern that exists. I just have concerns that it wouldn't necessarily, and it's the same concerns that I would have as a CPA signing off on a tax return, signing off on, whether acting as the CFO, whatever hat you want to wear in this. Well, I'm not the auditor. I can put that hat on, and it's a comfort level from our side of the table that it's not there yet, that governmental authorities have not given their blessing. Various
Yes.
banks that are working in this industry are,
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine the looks on their faces seeing something like this, where they're like,
Mm-hmm.
guys, come on. You know what we have to go through? We have to bend the knee to FinCEN. We have to do all this additional reporting. We have to charge you guys an extra $500 a month just to make sure that we're compliant. And then you want to go and throw this at us on top of that. So I think there's still a lot of buy-in that needs to happen, which again is the biggest reason why I would be hesitating to push anything as being a good answer at scale. I don't
Yeah,
think we're
no.
terribly far off, but
Mm-hmm.
I still think we have a long way to go. But if I were to be glass half full, and Lord knows I usually am annoyingly positive, I think it's the opportunity, because
Yes.
I think the answers are in development, and I think
Uh-huh.
that's why there is a bit of excitement. So trying to just dispel some of the negative thought patterns that we've already talked about from from some of the not so nice players out in the market. There are good ones out there working. We just need to give them the
Yes.
time and the opportunity to get it over the hill.
Yep, yep. And we've spoken about, how blockchain brings in the, about how blockchain helps to also ensure the product quality and authenticity, and it traces the entire transaction. So it's creating that. It brings in that accountability and traceability to the forefront, which is really good for us as CPAs. We really want that transparency.
Exactly. And us,
Right.
if I were a betting man, I would
Mm-hmm.
say that seed to sale software, which it's mandated by every state that has a legal market, it's a cost of doing business sort of thing.
Yes.
For the most part, it's old technology. It's legacy software. It is again, I'm generalizing because obviously there's exceptions to every rule, blah blah blah. It's not exactly intuitive, and again, that's where there's a ton of opportunity. And just given the usefulness of the blockchain from an inventory perspective, I mean, it should be pretty straightforward to be able to tag a seed at the cultivator level. It goes into the ground, and boom, that tag follows it all the way through, and it's auditable top to bottom. One additional area
Auditable.
that I if I had a better coding background, I that would be a pretty big hobby of mine, because that's
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
and I'll give you the accountant, sort of the
Mm-hmm.
accountant use case here, which
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately have run into in the past, where
Mm-hmm.
you have a client who maybe is not so diligent about their inventory reporting. So they go back to
Right.
the seed to sale software, which should not be used for inventory purposes. I cannot stress that enough.
Yep.
They didn't have that that third party reporting to back up what their inventory was for a certain period. For a
Yep.
lot of the seed to sale software, you can't go back in time and trace to a specific period.
Oh.
So you you pass the last day of the month, you
Mm-hmm.
got a problem if you didn't
Oh.
export the reporting, screenshot it, sign off, blah blah blah.
Yep.
So it becomes a really big problem to validate. But you would
Wow.
not have that problem on the blockchain.
Yes, that's for sure. That's for sure. Because every record will be,
Hmm.
recorded there. It's all on the nodes. There are hash values to each of the transactions, so you don't need to worry about it. You can
Exactly.
go. In fact, I think I mean a little bit off topic, but I do remember KPMG. I think it was KPMG, or I'm not sure if it was PwC, but they were the ones who actually came out and said that they want to incorporate the blockchain technology into their audit and assurance practices.
Yes.
Like they're trying to make their clients also adopt it so that the turnaround time for audit becomes quicker, because when the transaction is verified and there is things at the back. I mean, it was really interesting, because what they would do is, every transaction, if it's a bill, that bill becomes kind of like an NFT, which has got its own value, and that's tied into the blockchain. So that's tied into that transaction, and that's recorded on the blockchain. So you don't need to spend time trying to find it and verify it, because it's right
It's
there. You can't
right there.
modify it as well. It's right there. You can't even modify it, because if somebody were to change anything after it, immediately it will pop out, because when it was finalized and put onto the chain as a block, it's set in stone. So very
Exactly,
interesting.
and that feeds another level, because then you can employ automation tools on top of the blockchain. And so
Correct.
you just need to have the right staff members directing traffic. See, the automation's not scary. We're not going anywhere, CPAs. It's just somebody has to direct that traffic. But the bigger thing
Absolutely.
is, from an assurance standpoint, capital A this time, it
Mm-hmm.
lets you test either a greater population with that same
Mm-hmm.
efficiency or the whole
Mm-hmm.
population. So you know you have
Yeah,
100,000 transactions, just making stuff up, instead of picking your
exactly.
favorite,
Yes,
84. And
yes,
obviously
yes,
there's randomizers, blah, 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 I know. But
yes,
now you can test 60%, 80%, 100% in that same time
yes,
frame. And that's
exactly.
a really big deal.
It is a big deal. It is a big deal. I mean, like I said, blockchain brings in this accountability and traceability to the forefront, but its adoption comes with challenges that need,
Well,
thoughtful
adoption's a
navigation.
big deal, and that's where, listen, it's no secret public accounting in general needs a little bit of a PR facelift and all that. That's a whole nother podcast for another day. But
Yes.
specifically here with accountants adopting blockchain technology, I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it is it's language, it's comfort, and it's how things are presented. So
Mm.
if you can explain things in such a way where it's not so scary and it's not tied to Bitcoin or whatever it might be, I think adoption goes a lot faster. And having seen clients with those type of technology products start to sell and sell in the right way, so without those sort of buzzwords, but well, this is the problem, this is how we solve it. Don't worry about the back end, don't worry about what it's built on, because that's a whole different conversation. But this is the
Yeah.
functionality, this is how it works, and this is how much it costs, whatever. That conversation goes way differently than if you try to go in all buzzy and try to, sort of chase the shiny object.
Yeah. I mean, like, so because while the technology is ready, the blockchain is ready. It's there.
Right.
But there's also the consumer adoption that remains a critical hurdle, right? For cryptocurrency to work in cannabis, customers also would need to be comfortable to use it in
Well, a
everyday
customer would have to have a
transactions.
wallet readily available.
Yes.
You'd have to have the infrastructure in place at the dispensary, at the, whatever facility, depending where you are in the vertical. That sort of adoption as well. Because the other side to this is, and again, just generalizing, obviously, but you're dealing with a lot of relatively inexperienced business operators.
Mm-hmm.
So the more complications you add, there's almost an exponential level of difficulty and hurdles that are applied to that. And
Mm.
one, that's the value of us being trusted advisors and allowing us to do our work and to be a part of the vetting, be a part of the day-to-day operations, to help beyond just debits and credits and tax returns and all that. There's a bigger part that
Abs-
we can play here, and that's part of
Yep.
it as well. Making sure that there is the right technology adoption, the right way to get to the bottom line.
Mm.
For the most part,
But
this product sells itself. Like once you have
yep.
awareness, once you have a following, that sort of thing, you have your sort of loyal customer base on the retail side.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Just keep just keep compliant. Like you're in a
Yes.
relatively good place. The people that want the product want the product. The people that want to be educated, you can educate them. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess
it's
it's, I
making sure
guess,
that you can get to that right bottom line number and pay the tax man.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
yeah, I guess, businesses should become more cognizant and probably offer, like, educating their customers on this, offering it as an incentive that if you were to get this done, then, that kind of gives you that, and they probably offer special discounts for whoever completes those courses of understanding
Well,
how to
that I
have a
could say,
wallet.
you're not legally allowed to offer discounts for cannabis, but
Okay.
I knew what you meant. Just for anybody listening, technically, don't do that.
Okay, don't do that. Don't do that. Okay, I didn't know that, so thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, like offering some can
There are
is there
also
no
there's
form?
loyalty programs. There's all types of
Yes,
incentives that are fully
yes,
compliant that you can use.
Okay, perfect. But this is a discussion that I had on Reddit with this other gentleman that I want everybody to know about because this is the question that a lot of people think about. If I were to deal in cryptocurrency, a business receives payment. Let's say somebody buys cannabis worth 1 Bitcoin. That's a lot of cannabis, all right?
Whoa,
Let's say
baby.
one,
Yeah.
but argument's sake, pre-pandemic times when Bitcoin was not even tenth
Right.
or whatever it was, right? Let's say a value of 1 Bitcoin is $100 today when I buy
Yep.
cannabis worth 1 Bitcoin. Now, I as a business have got 1 Bitcoin, but tomorrow the value of that 1 Bitcoin becomes 110, or
Hmm.
it could also fall down to 70, right? That could also
Yep.
happen. So, how do businesses protect themselves from these challenges?
With good accounting. Uh,
Okay.
no, in all seriousness, that is the answer. So that's why you have something like a subledger, or even if you don't want to spend the funds for a subledger, you have someone with the right background that's watching those transactions, because you need to know when that time of transaction is so that you can assign a fiat value to it. And
Correct.
then that's
Correct.
where, so you have that economic event that happened. So you sold X amount of inventory. This was the cost of goods sold associated with it because, well, 280E, you really need to capture that COGS. That's the name of the game here.
Yes.
And then one step further, so you understand the value that it was sold at that date and time. So you know what the margin is on that sale. And then from that point, if you talk about the volatility here, we're capturing what the unrealized gains or losses are on
Correct.
that individual Bitcoin. And
Yes.
that's where devil's in the details, and that's where there's multiple aspects from not just a tax, but from sort of an operational perspective as well. If you're keeping GAAP compliant financials, which that's another argument. If you're how this is a little philosophical, but how can you have GAAP compliant financials in an illegal industry?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good thought. But hey, it's not illegal at a state level.
No, of course, and that's it's a philosophical sort of thing. Like you can keep it to the letter of U.S. GAAP as best as possible, though.
Yeah.
The whole 280E tax situation does lend to some concerns on how you present certain things, but it really it just adds an extra little bit of flavor that you have the crypto holdings, then you have all the unrealized gains and losses on top of that. uh, Again, circling back, the answer to that is just good accounting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You dealt with, like crypto businesses, cannabis businesses. I'm sure you've also dealt with businesses that are cannabis accepting cryptos and everything. Would you be able to share, without naming anybody, like one of the examples of where this adoption, I mean, educating the customer hesitation was successfully overcome that led to higher crypto adoption at good business for it? Would you be able to share an example?
Yeah, just to navigate carefully here. A dispensary in, I think I don't remember if they were Denver proper, or somewhere in the neighborhood around there.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, so they basically had set up a little stand, QR code, you could scan it, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you set up your crypto wallet, and yeah, it's simple. As long as it's populated, you complete the transaction. It was that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Simple being the key. Um,
Oh,
that's if for a consumer, if you can set up something as simple as a QR code, it takes them to the right place. You download it. There's a couple of steps. It's not going to take you 41 minutes to go through the whole thing. The others, again, making sure that it's KYC compliant, so you're not
yes.
from a liability from an AML. You want to make sure you're not running afoul of any more rules than you're already walking the line on.
Yes.
But there's plenty of
Yes.
platforms out there that can handle a crypto transaction. That's that's doable. The one thing I will
Mm-hmm.
say is you have to make sure that you know your audience. There are
Yes.
certainly populations out there that are less less educated and less open-minded for this type of thing. So
No, yeah, no, absolutely. And like you rightly said, simplicity. Because I remember many years back when I was in Dubai at the airport, they had a vending machine that actually was giving out gold bars. Like you could actually get a gold bar from a vending machine.
wow,
All right. And now I know that there are vending machines for cryptos. Like you want to
that is
buy
a
crypto.
surprising huge industry.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
I've had a few clients in that space, and I cannot believe how much they've grown. It is
yep.
stunning, and you see that,
It is
and
stunning.
supermarkets are actually one of the biggest areas of distribution for those crypto ATMs, the Bitcoin ATMs specifically.
Yeah, yeah.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Exactly. Who would have thought? And I guess um, I don't want to sound political, but the current scenario of the government and the way we see where it's heading with the existing administration, not the existing, but the administration that's going to be the administration for the next 5 years.
Right,
They have got a pro crypto
right.
outlook. I
Yep.
wouldn't really say a pro cannabis outlook, but at least they have a pro crypto outlook. So I guess that would that would kind of aid
Well,
in
here's
better.
what's relatively interesting. So theoretically, uh, the whole rescheduling effort of cannabis is codified at the
Uh-huh.
federal level. Now it just has to be executed, and there's a lot of legal machinations that have to happen.
Hmm.
So I again, it's tough to look in a crystal ball, and it's obviously even more delicate to be apolitical about this. Uh, but but just based on our understandings, if if the federal government doesn't do much, if they just let the legal process work as it was established, as the ball's already in motion, then we should be on our way to a rescheduling of cannabis at the federal level.
Oh,
Now we get into a conversation of what does that mean, and
yes,
it
because
gets
that's
into a little
exactly what
bit
I was
of
going.
the devil you know versus the devil you don't, and
Yes,
it,
but
taxes are
if I were to
obviously.
ask you, right? I mean, this has not happened yet, but probably this is something that we can save for the future when this actually becomes. But if I were to ask you today, if cannabis becomes federally legal, if cannabis became federally legal, how do you think the role of cryptocurrency in the industry will evolve?
Oh, legal is such a funny term because it all depends on what bucket it falls under. Because if it goes to Schedule 3,
Yes.
now it's under the FDA. Now it's there's all the rules, all the compliance, all the filings, everything else. So you might have theoretically lessened the upfront tax burden. You're not necessarily taxed at the gross profit level now, but
Yes.
all the extra infrastructure that comes with it. Oh
Hmm.
boy. So that's one bucket. To answer your question more specifically, what does that do to crypto playing a part? In my mind, it certainly opens things up. I think to go back to that word opportunity, I think it provides even more opportunity than there was before, I should say. It it provides for a more interesting and open conversation, but I think it also might push the timeline out a little bit further, only because there's going to be so many hurdles and so many issues
Yes.
to come up, and
Too
the
many
litigation
boxes
that's
to
going to come
check.
out of this, that man,
Yeah.
it's going to be an interesting ride for a while.
Yep. 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 I mean, the future holds immense potential, right? But businesses must adapt strategically to make the most of these opportunities,
Right.
right? So if I were to just like wrap up today's discussion, just so that everybody knows, we highlighted some truly transformative insights, right? We started with examining the banking challenges, and it was surprising for me to know that there are actually some small players, some community banks who are actually doing it. I thought it was like all the banks are saying no, but you cleared it out that it's not like that, right?
Oh, it's not. No,
So
there are a lot more banks than you think, and
yes.
man, just to put a bow on that, I remember in the early days of this this momentum behind legal markets. So we're looking at I got into this 8 going on 9 years ago. Wow, it's been a while.
Yeah.
So you look back, like call it 2016, there's a
Mm-hmm.
couple of banks, but the ones that did were able to charge thousands per month just for the
Mm-hmm.
right to have a bank account, for the right
Whoa.
for them to come in, collect your cash, throw it into their vault and count it on a website somewhere that says you have X amount in cash. Like I mean,
Yeah.
thousands per month. And people were happy to pay it because what else are you gonna do? I mean, I've walked into those vaults that had the cash stacked from floor to ceiling. That is I mean, at first glance, it's kind of cool,
It,
but then you start
it's a
putting
sight to remember.
you put your
It's a
CPA hat
sight.
on for a second, like, oh, this is a nightmare. This is horrible.
Yes, yes. I mean, yeah, as a person, it's a sight to see. I mean, you definitely love seeing that. But then
Right.
as a professional, when you step into those shoes, you're like, wait a minute, this is
Great. Now what do we do with all this cash? What's
exactly,
happening here?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, like, my name is Saul, but I'm not really a Saul Goodman from the Breaking Bad. Otherwise, I would have been able to probably give a solution to that. But yeah, I mean, like, I mean, the banking challenges, thank you for bringing that out. And also, you offered some really innovative ways through which, cryptocurrency can be this really secure way of doing it. So, I think, and also touching on the supply chain, because our blockchain also helps in the supply chain, I guess and like you rightly mentioned, to keep in compliant with the US cap. And I guess blockchain kind of ensures that transparency and that regulatory compliance that is needed in the industry, right? So, thank you so much for this engaging discussion. Now, before I let you go, do you have any final thoughts or advice for businesses that are navigating these challenges?
Oh man, do we have another hour to go through that? Because that's that is not a short conversation. No, I would say devil's in the details. So make sure you have your debits and credits right. Make sure that you understand what is and is not a taxable transaction. If you are dealing in crypto, get a subledger. It's worth every penny. Again, do your diligence on those. Beware of anything that sounds too good to be true. I mean, we're talking about two industries where there's a few
Yes.
people who've made a lot of money and a whole lot of people who are not great actors. So be
Yes.
really, really careful. And if you ever have any questions, if you're unsure of anything, call a professional. Call someone who's got the industry experience. It can be me. It doesn't have to be me, but call someone you trust that has done work in this industry. You don't want to guess and be wrong because there
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
so many people, so many organizations that are looking for it. So just
No,
make
absolutely.
sure
Absolutely.
you're absolutely positive before making any sort of major strategic decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they will reach out to the professionals and each one will have their own. But then, if at all there was somebody who wanted to get in touch with you, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about your work? What is the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, website is red5services.com.
All right.
Email is zach@red5services.com. You can find me on
Okay.
social. I'm at Zach Gordon CPA, and on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
Zachary Gordon CPA.
Alrighty, that's it. Okay, to our listeners, you got that. Make sure you have noted that down. If at all you ever run into any hurdles related to crypto or cannabis, Zach's your man. Or should I say,
Oh
better
man,
call
building
Zach.
expectations there. Shoot.
Well, but Zach, this is truly, exciting. Thank you so much for your time, and to our listeners as well. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to MyCPE for more deep dives into the intersection of technology and industry-specific challenges. Until next time, keep innovating in everything you do. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.